So then we are back with the more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, the refined and the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find then the 61st chapter with a layer of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. And also Yeshayahu chapter 1:8 explains the place where the first holy city must be at. And most importantly, at the moment, while we wait for the holy city on the land of Cush, northern Sudan, we find ourselves studying then Daniel the 11th chapter. Extremely important chapter, because whatsoever is on Daniel the 11th chapter and the 12th, those were already tested prior of 1009. So then let's establish the importance of the main computer. Explain what it is and what it does, and how can we link the computer with the holy instructions. It's very simple. When we read then the chapters of Daniel, most importantly the 11th chapter, we find then a section of it related then with the computer. How can we determine this? Yeshayahu the prophet mentioned in chapter 1:8, then woe to the cities of the beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, because those places explained by Yeshayahu the prophet explains of an area regarding then the mines of the Congo, because of its riches for the electronic or technology of the time of the end. When Daniel spoke of later in the 12th chapter, prior of the starting of the autumn feast, you find then the people would go to and fro for quite some time, 1,000 years, and then the people of the Creator would be joined with the world for a time. It is obviously a time where then we are beyond then 2009. We are during the time of the precision and the time of the restoration, prior of the autumn feast. So then, how can we determine then the main computer? Firstly then, we must understand then monetary systems. The US has yet holding the USD as the main exchange of the West. The East, or then the Pacific, they are trying to get rid of the USD because of this devaluation. And it's very important, because at this moment we must establish a link, the importance of the computer. So then, China has already their monetary system and they have the virtual yuan. However, their main system is yet not launched. You find then bits and pieces of it indicating then the main system of the Chinese, that simply would be a giant market in the computer where you can purchase, you can invest at the same time. So then, each computer then later must become a central bank. Using the Chinese yuan, you can make your own computer then a central bank. This means there won't be a link of your computer and your local central bank. You are going to simply buy the Chinese yuan and you're going to do trade with China directly with them, not using your local central bank. Obviously China has its own central bank, but they are cleared because they are the very leader of the time of the end. So then, how is it going to play? As you can understand, when you then download the Chinese system in your computer, you can make a choice of investing in more than 1,000 products, more than 900,000 products. You can project. You can then understand how nations are going to be involved with infrastructure, what nations are going to be invested more in mining, what countries are going to be invested then in electricity. Then you have to understand infrastructuring and project what kind of materials they will use at most. Then you can project your investments. As you pick from a list of thousands upon thousands of products, then you can make a projection of the future and what kind of products will to be sold the most. Then when you then every month you make a balance of what you have invested versus what you earned, then you begin to receive from the Chinese system directly from it, without a link from your central bank. Every transaction then is given and then recorded. Then you can do via the same system. There is no link with regular local central bank. The question is, how are they going to charge taxes? Thus then you find Galah. Then you find Revelation, where the Messiah said, in the freighters of the earth. Then you have to leave a bit of space for the freighters. Not only the freighters, but then the local banks. So the project is very big. It is truly enormous. When you begin to think of it, find yourself, then if you are familiar with eBay, for instance, you find eBay and PayPal as then means of purchase of products, a means of payment. The Chinese system is very similar. They have then a huge, giant Chinese eBay of their own. They are then control, obviously, their own products. They have the control of their own products, and they use their own banking as PayPal. So it's very convenient. It's truly a genius type of a system where you get the most of it. Governments, they won't get any of it if they do not come up with a system of the computer. Thus, you begin then your quest and understand the importance of this computer the next 27 months. Let's say, for instance, you find yourself then at the very moment where the Chinese then they launch their system. Very simply, you download their system in your computer. You can select from the many thousands of products. Then you can invest in as many as you want, and you can purchase as much as you want. However, you've been doing this using USD. You are going to convert your existing USD into yuan, then you can use the Chinese system. However, the Chinese system does not have a link with the central bank. Thus, you have a system protected. However, as you begin to earn the money from the Chinese system directly from them, then you have at some point remove part of it to use with your own expenses if you decide to do so. Or you can leave it there and you can have 10, 12, 24 digits of earnings without any trouble. And you don't have to declare your taxes either. So it's a clean money. It is not a great deal? It is. However, how then the governments are going then to receive taxes? That's where then we begin to understand the most important point at the moment is the building of the computer because of taxes. But not only this, establishing a link with the Chinese system with the local central banks of every country, then establishing a link with the banks of the local governments where they are at. So people can do a couple of situations. They can relate themselves with their own local central banks, and they can relate with their banking, their local banking, each of them with a certain percentage. Not only this, you have to understand also the freighters. They must establish themselves also with the local central banks and their own banking. So it's a very enormous task, and these around the world. The whole world linked up with the Chinese system, so then we can understand how to charge taxes. So then, now we are more clear the importance of this system and the importance of the computer. We have to establish then a link with the despised one, meaning United States, and then the covenant. You find these precisely regarding this topic in the 23rd verse of the 11th chapter. Then you find the United States join up again with Israel in the first tabernacle service in order for them to build the third temple, and it won't be built. And the United States again trying to exercise what they used to exercise for the last couple hundred years out of 1,000. So then, in order for these to take place regarding then Congo, because of the riches of Congo. Why do we do this? Because the main portion of the 11th chapter of Daniel explains the relationship of the kingdom of the east, north, and south. The kingdom of the east is already set. They have what they want. However, they must expand further. The northern kingdom, they used to be big in the past, and they will be big again because of the netzer of the Gentiles. When you understand, then the Soviet Union is then joining up with China, and they already are. They are already joining up with Cuba and regaining what they used to be in the 60s, but not by force. It is by trade. Thus providing a link with the Congo, Cuba, and then the Soviet Union and China, and then India and Brazil, and then South Africa, and further on. We began then to link up these points layer by layer, organized. How can we establish then the covenant later in the 23rd verse of the 11th chapter regarding then Congo, the southern kingdom, and then you have the understanding of the covenant, but not the standing vision. The standing vision is the second tabernacle services restoration period, meaning then is the tabernacling on the land of Cush, further north. Besides the further north site, there is also the 7 cities that must be then regenerated or then rebuilt. So then you find a relationship of then the kingdom of the south with the kingdom of the east and kingdom of the north. You find the United States and Israel again trying to do what they did in the last 200 years. In order for these to take place regarding the kingdom of the south, you have to have the computer. The computer is the link of our time and this section of the covenant because it's related directly with the trade. If China takes over the worldwide trade without United States influence, then the despised one and the covenant of the first tabernacle service would not make any sense. China would be the new power of the world and US would be disregarded. But then you find the US later will come out of this deal from Congo using then deceit as precisely stated on the 23rd chapter. Then you find themselves or then the despised one coming out very rich because of the system previously then set up. And we are during this time of setup of this new system. So then later you understand the rest of it. However, at some point, then when Israel will be pushing for the third temple, then the people, then the Ishmaelites will be against them. Thus, then the relationship of Israel and US will be broken. Thus, US then return, and then its ships must return to US, and they will return furious. Thus, we prepare then the scenario for the 12th chapter. Well, that's later. At the moment, the most important point is US being wise, understanding, for instance, Brazil. Brazil, unfortunately, is the lowest country of the BRICS. There is absolutely not much going on in Brazil. As you can read in BRICS Post, you find a few articles. Most of them are related then with the spying. That's no trade, simply expenses. You find involved then with IMF and criticizing IMF. You find Brazil receiving then the BRICS and hosting the BRICS next year, along with the World Cup and along with the presidential elections. So it's a very trying time for Brazil. And at the moment, the economy is not growing. The Brazilian government should be doing trade with Asia, and unfortunately they are very stagnated. They are simply maintaining what they have using those funding then firstly generated by the previous president, Mr. Silva. At the moment, the Brazilian government is simply wasting this money generated in the previous presidency. So then at the moment we have a problem then with inflation, a problem then obviously with the interest, and not only this, then we are not yet prepared for next year's visit when then Brazil will be hosting then the BRICS. So there is absolutely nothing going on in Brazil at the moment. That's why we are then the lowest of the list. But then next year, the delegation, they are coming to Brazil, so then we can get shaked up a bit, and then we can get some trade going, because at the moment you'll find most of the East and then the Pacific, they are joining themselves, and they have already mining, they have fuel, they have what they want for the factory of China. So there is not much left regarding then what the world can give as far as helping China producing what they must. Not in every section, but then every country must be aware of the importance of the leadership of China as per the instructions of the Prophet. We've got no choice. So then, we find ourselves then already linked with the importance of this new computer system. US must build this system and then later monitor then the percentages. Let's evaluate what does it mean. Because when there is a link with the central bank and the banking system, the local banks, you understand a flow of systems. When the Chinese system launched their own, they have their very own link with each computer, then excluding the central bank. The most important task is then US receiving the proper coltan quantities so they can build the components and build the computers, because they must come up with a percentage of the relationship of the Chinese system, and then the Chinese system in every computer, and depending upon what country they are at, they must establish a relationship with the Chinese system and the central bank and the local banking. It's very important because each computer must have a banking of their own in order for them to get their funding. So when they make a deal with China, they begin to receive from China, they receive a certain portion in yuan protected, but they have to have this money removed from the system for their own expenses. They have to have a local bank to do the exchange. The same time, the local bank must have a link with the central bank because they have to pay their dues. And most importantly, then the freighters linked with the computer of the individual, and then at the same time paying taxes for the local government and federal government, linked directly with the central bank where this person is located at. So do you understand then the importance of the computer? So then later, when the computer then is launched, the next 27 months, US has the responsibility of maintaining guard of those percentages. Let's say every country in the world, they send a report of what percentages they want from every deal. When a person makes a transfer of money, when a person is making a purchase, when the freighters are linked with them, when the freighting then paperwork is then printed, taxes instantly must be given to the local government. In each of them they have a certain percentage depending upon the country. Then US must monitor these percentages so they can maintain a computer that is neutral and not manipulated by any other market. Very important. So then we understand then the huge importance of this computer. It is crucial because when the Chinese system is launched, then the governments won't have any time to go back and try then to repair it, because every user of the Chinese system would never want to have a link with the local bank, neither with the central bank. In fact, the banking of this time, if the computer does not get built on time, they're going to be, in quote, a skeleton crew type of banking. They can forget savings and the system of the regular banking, other than the savings, the checking amount is going to be in the bare minimum. So banks are going to be in jeopardy. Not only this, then the local shops, they must be aware of that when the system is launched, their people are going to be purchasing from the system because they can't get delivered to their homes. So the computer is extremely important. And what is the most important type of work in the future? Related with the infrastructure, mining, transportation. For instance, factories making products related with logistics, ships and trucks and engines, and whatsoever is related with the packaging and boxes and parcels. Parcels shops is going to be extremely important. So let's then understand precisely what this computer then does. The computer must not only do the instant exchange when a person then purchases yuan, must maintain a system of taxation, must be given then instantly every nation what their dues based from what they want from the system or the percentages. In the US, it must monitor these percentages very closely. So then the world can do trade via virtual systems without manipulation from specific countries. It does not mean the percentages won't change. They will change, but they have to be reported so the proper percentage changes can be done properly. Some countries, they do not have responsibility, they want to get the most of it. Sometimes they can pump up these percentage very high. Then it destroys the local economy. So it must be monitored as per the flow of the market. That's when the US then have the authority until the covenant is then linked later with Israel, and then the deceit of the last 200 years would again be used for a short time. Then you understand what takes place later. So then the computer is extremely important the next 27 months, because the more the nations are neglecting this topic, the more China wins. And the more complicated later than reverse, because of the private rights. People, they have rights when they are online. And it won't be very easy later for people to probe in their own systems. While then the USD has value, the computer should be built ASAP. So then people, they can get the USD while valuing, and then they can get the Chinese yuan later to use as a means of exchange. So then we understand the importance of the computer. So please stay tuned. Much more coming.